all so late here. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm Tom Garza, the director of the Texas Language Center. I'm also associate professor in Slavic and Eurasian Studies. Welcome, welcome. It's our last Language Matters of the semester, of the spring. So already I'm going to anticipate welcoming you all back here in the fall as we begin our the second bit of 2019 here as well. But as our concluding speaker of now what has been 2 semesters of just graduate student presentations that have really, I think, helped us as tenure track and non-tenure track faculty understand what's going on in our classes where AI is more or less rule. They're the ones who set the tone of how language classes progress and proceed. We've been so lucky to have distinguished assistant instructors and graduate students teaching our courses coming and sharing their ideas with you. So without further ado, let me just quickly point out 2 handouts you've got here. One is our remaining events for the language series here at the Texas Language Center. On the bright pink sheet are 2 summer workshops being co-sponsored with Coral, our Center for Open Education Resources and Language Learning at UT, as well as TLC, that are taking place during the summer. So there is language stuff going on all the way through the remainder of spring and into the summer. For today's Language Matters, I'm very pleased to welcome graduate student and colleague Victor Garre León, who's a first-year PhD student in Hispanic linguistics and is an AI assistant instructor of Spanish in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese here at UT Austin. His research interests lie in second language acquisition and processing second language pragmatics, as well as second language pedagogy. In fact, I'm now shameless plug here. He's currently pursuing a graduate portfolio, one of our first cohorts in the graduate portfolio, newly inaugurated portfolio in language teaching and program coordination through the Texas Language Center. He's also completed an MA in teaching Spanish as a foreign language from Universidad Internacional Menéndez Pelayo and the Cervantes Institute in Spain, and has an MA in Hispanic Literatures from West Virginia University. Prior to coming to UT, Victor taught in Spanish as a lecturer in the Department of Romance, Languages, and Literatures at Michigan in Ann Arbor, and is an assistant instructor of Spanish at West Virginia University, as well as a study abroad program that included the Spanish Language and Culture School from Universidad Internacional Menéndez Pelayo and Santander in Spain. It's my great privilege to welcome finally back to us here Victor León, who's going to be teaching Languaculture Through Media in the second language classroom. Welcome, Victor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Garza, for inviting me to the talk. And Dr. Garza emailed me a few weeks ago asking me if I had something that worked well in my classes that I would be interested in sharing. And my main idea was to share a course I designed when I worked as a lecturer in Michigan. And I had the opportunity to design my own course according to a topics course is called, as part of the foreign language requirement that the students have there. And I came up with this idea of using a TV show as the core material for my class. And I will show, today I will talk about the background for these, behind this, and also I will focus and I will explain the contents of the course that we studied in this class. It was entitled Spanish Culture Through Media at the time. And after this semester at UT, I gave the Languaculture term to this course after being in a class on multiliteracies with Dr. Blythe. And I will show how these activities that I included in this course apply to as languaculture activities. And this notion of languaculture is a concept again on the multiliteracies approaches and specifically to collegiate for language teaching. So the background for this semester we discussed some readings such as Software and Arends, remapping the foreign language curriculum. And what they discussed was the need to unify the traditional dichotomy that we usually find in lower versus upper division courses, as just language courses in the lower division and content courses in the upper division courses. And the creation of this course also stems from my willingness to depart from this dichotomy and as part of the 4 language requirement. And also the motivation behind this was not being restricted to a textbook, but also use materials that I would create, I would develop in the class, and that they would be free for my students. So also apart from this, this goes from the need again of integrating the curriculum in second language classes from the skills versus intellectual endeavors to skills and intellectual endeavors. And also, as Heidi Burns discussed in her article, there was she posted it as a house divided, right, incorporating culture in the foreign language department, and she also emphasizes the need to include content in language division courses. And she claims the need to change this type of institutional practices so that we can reconceptualize the relation between language instruction and the teaching of culture. And because in many of these cases, culture remains, as she mentions, additive, and it's only treated when we finish the focus on form, or we just finish the grammar content, right? So we just add some. In some cases, we add some culture to the classroom. And also, Swaffer and Aris discussed these integral issues of language and second language learning, and they suggest that multiple modalities with these students' cognitive processing will become more effective, and that we need to also rethink the practices of giving students language, literature, and culture, but providing them with a multiliteracies approach, including also multimodality in the language classroom. So with this background, I wanted to set out where the course lies within the language program. So it will be the 4th semester of, so this one, Spanish 232, it's the 4th semester of the language requirement. And students have the option there in the Department of Romance Languages to take either a general class or what's called a topics class. And one of the course I offered was Spanish Culture Through Media. There were many other options in Spanish and Italian and French also. And in other departments such as German, we also have these topics classes and that they could take if they wanted to. So usually they would register them according to their interest. So in my case, it focused on Spain. There were other courses focusing on the Andean region, for example, and these were some examples of these courses. And I'm not sure if you've seen the TV show. It's on Netflix. So I just wanted to show the trailer of the TV show for some of you who may not be familiar with it. It's in Spanish. I couldn't get the English subtitles, so I apologize for that. But if you have any questions, let me know.
¿Qué les
in which the three main characters travel through time and to different periods of Spain's history to save some problems that come up by different entities, but they have different missions. And the purpose is the students are prepared with background information before watching these episodes, and then this leads to class discussions and other out-of-class activities that are more focused on these cultural contents, and we'll discuss some activities now. But basically, the course, the content that we saw in the course, it started from the 19th century, in which they learn about the Spanish War of Independence and Goya, the painter, to the 16th century with the Spanish so-called self-proclaimed Invincible Army, and Lope de Vega also, and it went then to, I think you saw some excerpts from that, to the 20th century with the Spanish Civil War, the post-war period, and the meeting between Franco and Hitler in Hendaye in France, and also to the 15th century with the Catholic monarchs and Torquemada and the Spanish Inquisition, among other things. So they learn all these contents, and they also were provided with a big amount of background knowledge and information and readings to be able to understand the TV show before watching it. And then we'll work with other post activities. But also some other contents were 20th century with Picasso, Guernica, and when this picture was stole in Spain. Also the 80s in Spain with Leño and the Spanish Movida and the countercultural movements in the 80s. Also the Residencia Estudiantes in the 30s and the Spanish Republic, and some important writers such as Federico García Lorca, Dalí, and the painter. And we also watched in class the short movie Destino that he made with Walt Disney, and that they started in the 40s and it wasn't finished until a few years ago, I think. So basically this was all the content they went through, not chronologically, but they learned about this aspect of Spanish history and culture. So I think so the assessment, just very quickly, it followed a traditional class. They had a very big writing component in the class, and also oral component, oral presentations. And they had several exams, both written and oral. And the only thing that was the same as the general courses was the online grammar homework that was set by the program, that the only thing they had to do, as well as the other, so they had to do this. I'm sorry. So yeah, they had to do this as well as in the other courses. So yeah, that's so I wanted to focus now on the concept of languaculture, established by Agar and Riesegger. And this is a term that means that the language includes not only elements such as grammar, vocabulary, but also past knowledge, local and cultural information, and also habits and behaviors about a specific culture. So also, Dr. Blythe emphasizes the move from language and culture in the language classroom, but to language as culture in the foreign language classroom. And this is something that works well, I think, with this type of course. And also, regarding languaculture, they focus on the 3 dimensions that involves the study of various kinds of meanings, such as semantic and pragmatic knowledge, and they also give importance to the poetic dimension and the identity dimension. And in the presentation, I wanted to show some activities in which I focus on each of these dimensions too. For example, the semantic and pragmatic dimension, it focuses on the high degree in this course of semantic and pragmatic variability that we saw between the characters, the different characters in the TV show. For example, in discourse and meaningful interaction. And this was shown through speech acts, references, and representations. Also, the poetic dimension was focuses on the aesthetic uses of language, and it's usually linked to, in this course, to some periods of Spanish literature, for example, art, music. And the identity dimension, it focuses on the social and cultural significance of the choice of language or a variety of language, such as social, and this focuses on social linguistics, for example. In this case, in the identity potential, students could be able to gain awareness, for example, on the differences in pronunciation, for example, between Spanish speakers. For example, it was according to the level of proficiency, but for example, Spanish from the south and the north, and they could grasp those differences in the TV show. So, for example, when looking at the semantic and pragmatic dimension, I wanted to show this excerpt in which there were some certain misunderstandings between these two characters throughout the show. Because this one, for example, is a soldier from the 16th century, and the other one he talks to, he usually has some disagreements, there's some misunderstanding between them, and he's from the 80s in Spain, 1980s, so they use different words, expressions, and they usually come up with, end up in misunderstanding. So, again, if I can, does everyone understand Spanish to a certain extent? If not, I can summarize or give some, show the differences.
¿Puedo haceros una pregunta? Vale. Que os dispare. Ahora queréis que os pegue un tiro. No me digas.
So, can I ask you a question? And he's using the atheros, which is the formal, it would be very formal in current times, versus dispara, which means shoot it, no? So he's saying, do I have to shoot you now? I don't know. So there's certain misunderstandings here throughout the show. I can put some others.
Una forma de hablar, quiero decir, Leo, sí, sí. Que se pasaba las órdenes por el foro, que luchaba contra la corrupción y contra el poder establecido. ¿Poder qué? Bueno, los que mandan, vaya. Y eso, según vos, es propio de un buen alguacil. Pues hombre, lo digo porque de cine de tele ni paja la idea. Con coger el 75 me vale. Se sigue existiendo, claro. Pero ¿qué es el 75?
So, what is 75 is a vast number. They're having these misunderstandings, for example. And some
Con Dios. ¿Qué es eso del Quijote? Ha tenido un poquito de cultura general. No me llaméis tío, pues no sois mi sobrino. Y al vos no le venga.
¿A quién?
Al vos, como no le gusta que le llamen tío.
Él lleva de su época. Necesito un voluntario para seducir a la dama.
No me la cago seguro. Todavía me ligo con el usted, con el vos, yo la cago seguro. Venga ahí, para.
¿Esto es un pendrive?
¿Qué? Pincho.
So now this shows the other way around. They've been more exposed to the 21st century, and they're showing him, who comes directly from the 80s, what a pen drive is, and he doesn't have that. So they're having all these series of misunderstandings here. So basically, what I wanted to focus on here is the certain reach point moments that we see in the show, which are established by Agar, and these are moments of cultural misunderstanding, which covers language plus culture in this case, in terms of the pragmatic and the semantics. And then it shows also the variability of languaculture in discourse through verbal interaction. And it can show that language, again, is a series of networks across social, cultural, and historical contexts, and as we see here from the different characters in different periods of history. And in the classroom, these ritual moments, they favored discussions between the students, where there was surprise when they were exposed to this sample that they could also maybe relate to, or just how to say it raised their awareness on these differences too. And it also allowed them to analyze more critically the use of the language. Right. So also regarding the identity dimension, there's another episode in which Velázquez, the painter, meets Picasso, and then they're having a discussion on their favorite painters and artists. And they're discussing here also the cultural differences, for example, and stereotypes between Madrid and Barcelona and their impressions. and also since they already learned about these two painters before this episode, they got to experience to some extent what they already knew, and they also learn about the main works that they had. So they're having also a discussion on these issues.
Madrid, como ciudad, es pueblerina, antigua. Siempre lo ha sido, pero su gente es fantástica. Es cálida, abierta, te hace sentir madrileño desde el primer día. Y ahí está todo lo que un artista necesita para saber el futuro. El Museo del Prado. Claro, sí. ¿Iba usted a menudo al Prado? Pasaba más tiempo allí que en la academia. Andan inútiles, los de la academia. ¿Para qué pintan jarras y naturalezas muertas como si fueran reales? Para eso ya existe la fotografía. ¿Qué le gusta más del Prado? Bueno, sin duda. Tiene una capacidad increíble de mostrar el horror humano. Las pinturas negras, los fusilamientos. Y Velázquez. Bueno, Velázquez es el mejor. ¿Ha visto usted las meninas? Sí, claro, alguna vez. ¿Quién no ha visto las meninas? No digo por otra. Digo mirar el cuadro durante horas. No. Pues debería hacerlo. Cada vez que miras el cuadro, descubres algo distinto. La luz, una sombra, un rasgo. Es como si las figuras se movieran y todo cambiara. Ese Velázquez sí que era genio. No debe mirar tanto al pasado, Pablo. Usted tiene la posibilidad de cambiar el mundo.
This is just an absence, I think, that reflected the identity dimension of the course and some of the activities that we worked on. And finally, for the poetic dimension, I wanted to show this section on Federico García Lorca and the Residencia de Estudiantes in the 30s or late 20s, and I think it was 20s. And they're having a discussion on some things we'll discuss.
Tú también te das pena. ¿Por qué lo eres? Porque tienes cariño hacia Dios. ¿Tanto se verdad? Pues sí. Puede que no lo sabemos. No estoy tan seguro. Aún nos quedan los sueños. Anoche imaginé un poema. El sueño va sobre el tiempo, flotando como un velero. Nadie puede abrir semillas en el corazón del sueño. Pero ¿cómo puedes saber un poema que imaginé anoche? Tú vienes del futuro, ¿verdad? Federico.
So they're reciting one of his poems that students get to see later, La leyenda del tiempo by Federico García Lorca, and they will work on this poem to interpret also the meaning at the comprehension level. But later I will provide them with a reinterpretation of this poem via, for example, a video that someone created, and I think it was really beautiful. And this video includes a reinterpretation of Lorca's poem, García Lorca's poem, with the movie Destino by Dalí. And then the students were exposed to the Spanish surrealist movement. And also this is sung, the poem by Lorca is sung by sorry?
Camarón.
¿Cómo?
Camarón.
Sí, Camarón. I was like, I don't know. My Camarón de la Isla. So students here get to experience, from experiencing the known, they experience also from experiencing the new, they experience the known also, and then they get to see a creative application of this poem. And also I would ask the students to look at the visual and sound play of the video to see, even if they don't understand, because of course this song is flamenco, so they wouldn't understand the lyrics, but also to see what their reactions or the experiences are when looking at all these, you know. And I would look at for example, this could account for the subjectivities on the interpretation of this video. So I would just play part of it very quickly. So I would ask students to compare the poem from Lorca and then the interpretation of this poem through this video, using the visual play and the sound play also. That was my main point in this case. And just to finish, there are some other activities I would have liked to use. That was my first time using this, teaching this course. I just taught it for a semester before coming to UT. And there were many resources online that I could have used, and there were also some ideas. There was a website from Spanish television that you could access, for example, scripts, podcasts from the actors, and also some small documentaries and web series that could have worked very well also for the class. And there's also a Twitter account on Ministerio del Tiempo, in which the fictional characters would comment on some issues on the TV show, and also where fans would ask questions or post comments. So my intention was also for the future to ask students to work on this and maybe have some more meaningful interactions on these topics. And also they were offering some additional links and on the historical content. For example, I think the second season they learn about Papa Luna, and then what's the history behind this. And another option was to use a comic that was released, and ask students to use these comics to develop students' writing, for example, and work on their metaphoric compounds to see if they can work on make associations between images and come up with a story. And I think that was one of my ideas to work on in future courses, but I didn't get to do that yet. And so some problems that I had with the course, not really problems, but some things that were, I think I would see as shortcomings, were of course the level of proficiency. They were in the last course of the language requirement, and at the beginning it was difficult for them to get used to the format of the class, and also to get used to the level of the TV show. They ended up doing very well, and they enjoyed the course, but at the beginning it was a bit challenging for them, and because it was many readings to prepare them beforehand. I forgot to mention that usually we would work on an episode every 2 weeks, and then it would be 1 week of preparation with readings and in-class discussions, and then after watching the show at home, we will work on discussions in class also. And also for the future, if I get to do this or maybe another topic, I would consider using a learning by design approach by Copenhagen that Copenhagen is established, and this, as I mentioned before in the presentation, this allows to design, for example, in this case, a lesson or a course from departing from the known, for example, experiencing the known or conceptualizing certain content to more to a broader spectrum, for example, from experiencing the known to experiencing the new, and applying appropriately to creativity. But that was some ideas I had for the future, for example, regarding this show or something similar. And I think that was oh yeah. And this also relates to some to news that were published also on the TLC. And for me, my intention with this course was just to, at the moment, was to teach something that would be interesting for students in this language department, And this article from the Chronicle of Higher Education just got my attention because of the amount of language courses that are getting lost, right? Such as, for example, Spanish, about 118 programs, or French also 129, German 86, and also some languages are raising their numbers, but still, I think it could be an effective way to promote and design courses that could be interesting and maybe meaningful to students in the languages, in the elementary language programs. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you so much, as usual. Thank you for also being so good with your time, especially given our incompetence setting up here. I apologize for that. We always open it to a few questions we hope you'd be willing to take.
Yep, of course.
Terrific. Any comments, questions? Carl, please.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I think this is terrific. And I didn't, when you talked about this course in class a couple weeks ago, I didn't really understand the time element. And what's interesting, and what I really understood from your talk, is that like your application of Riesiger and all these people who talk about languaculture, they're usually talking about it in terms of comparing different languages and culture. But here what's so interesting is within the language. So it's kind of like, instead of intercultural, it's intracultural. But you're still, I mean, all of those things apply. So the notion of a rich point, you can still have cultural misunderstandings within the same culture and language. So, I mean, I think this gives you a lot more to think about, because you could design courses. I mean, as you were showing it, I was thinking about, what is it? Is it like a Dickens? It's Mark Twain, where they have people from American society who come from different classes, like the Trading Spaces kind of trope. Hail up to, I mean, there are a lot of
Yankee King Arthur's Court.
yeah,
Time travel.
exactly.
Yeah.
There are a lot of instances of that same kind of notion where people are within the culture, but they are actually displaying such different kinds of semiotic, baggages. So that's a really rich vein. I hadn't understood that when you first explained it, but that makes all the difference in the world. Yeah. Yeah. Anyhow, that's just a comment, and I think that you could take that course and do it in different ways in other languages and other cultures. Yeah.
I think for Spanish, I haven't taught Spanish 611. It's the last course. I think it's taught one episode is taught probably at Adrian. Do you know it? So I know they teach an episode, one of the episodes, but I'm not familiar with that yet.
So I have a combination pack question comment as well. Again, thank you for this. I really like this, and it's I think you're doing incredibly interesting, and for the students, good work here. You showed at the very end that you're aiming for your students are attaining a actual intermediate mid proficiency level. Do you get to that with, do you know that because of OPIs, or how do you know that they're getting to that level?
That's what, I don't know that, but that's what they established in the department as what they need to achieve to go to the next level, which is
Right.
it's called a bridge course.
Right.
So when finishing the language requirement, it's said that they need to. So the content, it seems that
So
should
they're
be.
probably tested in a font or something. Do you know how they?
I'm not familiar with that.
Just curious about that. And I wondered if you are using anything like ACTFL OPI or anything Avant testing, if you heard of, you use, if you would incorporate the newer ACTFL ICC, the intercultural competence guidelines. I have to remember there's an extra C in there. Intercultural competence guidelines to look at this question for me that I've always been in trouble with since back in the 80s when we first started thinking about language and culture as one thing, and we're still thinking about it, thank goodness, is how do you know when, if the language level has gotten to a certain part? ACTFL is very good at telling us how our students can perform in language competence, but that cultural component that's so much a part of that performance, how do we know that they're measuring the same thing there, right? And so do you do anything in the way you've got your class set up now where even anecdotally that you, as you listen to them speak, that you know they're getting some of the culture side in tandem with the language side, or do you still keep them kind of separate in your mind?
So in this course, at least, it was integrated in all the evaluation. They were not asked to, for example, I emphasized a lot because there was so much content they were learning about. I emphasized a lot that it was not a history class, writing class,
Right.
but also they need to have some knowledge of the cultural aspects that we were seeing. And all the assessment, all the exams were focused on both language and the cultural part. They had to use the language to talk about what they learned in class, so they couldn't talk about anything else.
Mm-hmm.
It was directed towards that, but I didn't have any type of measure. I didn't consider the actual measures. But I will check it out.
Yeah, I'm not convinced of them yet. To just, where I'm coming from here, I'm not selling the ICC guidelines. I'm kind of trying to get a sense of do they work or not in classes like this that are trying so hard to do something we've not been able to do as well, just integrate language and culture as seamlessly as you have here. So I'd be curious if you might try something out, even on a kind of pilot test of ICC guidelines. Yeah.
It would be interesting to consider.
You do it through a grant through the TLC.
Exactly.
Other questions, comments? Carl, please.
Okay, no, wait.
Sorry, please, yes, please. Up front, yes.
Okay. The sources you use for the videos, are there many of those that have subtitles or none? Or
So what we had there was it was called the Language Research Center at the university, and we will require them with these courses or rapid revision courses to get access to these videos for free for the students, and also we had the options to ask them for the subtitles. These videos I downloaded them, and they didn't give me the choice, but always they had access to Spanish subtitles. And halfway through the semester, it was put on Netflix, and I have the impression that they went to watching on Canvas only in Spanish because they didn't have access to English subtitles. I have the impression that they moved to Netflix and watched it with English subtitles. So probably some of it, but that's my impression. But that's fine also. But they had access to subtitles, yes.
I'm a German professor, and the German videos now, a lot of them has subtitles, and so the lower end of the sequence of language, it makes it more accessible.
Of course.
And in some cases, I did the translating for them so that they have both subtitles and English translation.
Yes, they always were providing with subtitles. That's not in these videos, but in the course, yes, they were providing.
It's very helpful.
Yeah. Carl, I think you.
Yeah, I wanted to know what you thought about Rieseger's 3 different kinds of meanings. Did you think it helped you plan the course? And did you actually draw your students' attention to that in the way you did the activities?
So originally I didn't take the class, and I was not aware of this concept. teaching the
You were
class.
doing it without knowing.
But I'm doing yes,
Yeah.
basically. So the experience I got with curriculum, the small experience I got with curriculum design or lesson planning, I developed this course also with the help with my colleagues there, But after getting to know these theoretical aspects, I just applied them to what I was doing. But I think especially the meaning, the Kubo-Pacalazi's work, I will use them for sure next time. I think it could work very well there in this type of course.
Any other parting shots? Yes, sir, please.
Have you found that certain lessons or activities from this course, have you been able to apply them to like lower division Spanish courses? I'm just trying to think about, you presented it here as a whole course, but have you used any like pieces of it in your lower division Spanish classes?
Here?
Or in general?
No, I didn't use that after. I taught it for a semester and then I didn't continue teaching it, but probably if one of the, I think there's in 611, I think there's a second in Spain, so maybe one of the exhibits. The activities. So I have a whole semester planned, so I could probably
Do you think
use one of them.
they translate well to even like a Spanish 1 course? Is there some way you could,
It could
or
be.
is their level just not there?
Maybe it could be difficult because of the level.
Yeah.
But I would direct it maybe more towards 610, 611.
Yeah.
Challenging.
It was challenging.
Right, input plus.
It was challenging at the beginning, but
Yeah.
I think they enjoyed it.
Absolutely, yeah, something, it doesn't even have to be simple material, just a simple task, a simple exercise to go with it. But have them exposed to it, even as you say, 601, and certainly 611. I think you could get away with that without any problem. By the time they got to you then, they'd be so used to hearing these and seeing these kind of texts, they'll go further with them because they'll be able to be paying attention to more of the cultural information, things like who's Garcia Lorca, who is this Dani character, and so forth. Yeah.
Are there any Portuguese classes here at UT?
At UT here, yes.
Oh, yeah.
There's a Portuguese flagship.
Yes.
Woo!
It's a flagship. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it Brazilian or Portuguese?
I think it's Brazilian. This
Mostly Brazilian focus. It
Yeah,
depends on the
it's
instructor.
Yeah. Flagship.
Yeah.
in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese.
Anything else? Gentlemen, ladies, thank you all so much for being terrific stuff to keep thinking about. I appreciate it. Thank you. Nicely done.
I think it's great that they